Sometimes, life doesn't joke around. I started this with nothing but good intentions. No plans, no hidden motives. But somehow, good intentions can turn into chaos faster than you'd ever imagine. And that night, I walked straight into a storm I never saw coming. It was supposed to be a simple evening. A close friend of mine was having a birthday party at a downtown restaurant. My wife had been working late for weeks, and that night was no different. She called me just an hour before the party and said she couldn't make it. "You should still go," she told me. "Don't let them think I'm keeping you locked up at home." So, I got dressed, but honestly, I didn't really feel like going alone. That's when my mother-in-law, who was staying with us for a few days, appeared in the living room. She was watching TV, wearing a simple cardigan, sipping her tea. We started talking casually, and I half-jokingly said, "You know what? You should come with me. It'll be good to get some air." She laughed at first, waving her hand. "Don't be silly. What would people think?" But a moment later, she smiled. "Actually, why not? It's been ages since I went out." I didn't think much of it. She changed into something elegant but modest, and we left together. The ride there was full of light conversation about the city, her daughter's work, even the terrible traffic. It felt normal, completely innocent. But the moment we walked into that party, things shifted. People turned to look. Maybe it was the way she carried herself. Confident, graceful, or maybe it was just the wine talking, but soon people started whispering. A few joked, "Didn't know you traded your wife for an upgrade." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, trying to brush it off. I didn't want to make it awkward. The music was loud, the lights low. We danced once, just a friendly dance, and took a few pictures with the group. That's all it was. Or at least, that's all I thought it was. The next morning, I woke up to silence. My wife wasn't speaking to me. Her eyes, cold, red from crying, met mine like sharp glass. "You went to a party with my mother?" she asked, voice trembling. "And you let people take pictures of you two together?" I didn't even know what to say. I tried to explain that it was just a harmless night, that we were just being polite, that it meant nothing. But when trust cracks, words don't glue it back instantly. She showed me the photos. One of me laughing, another of my mother-in-law touching my arm, another of us dancing. Out of context, they looked wrong, like something intimate, like a betrayal. I spent the next few days trying to fix what had broken, apologizing, explaining, promising. But once a seed of doubt is planted, it grows faster than you can pull it out. Now, whenever I think of that night, I realize sometimes life doesn't need villains or bad intentions to create disaster. Sometimes, all it takes is one misunderstanding, one innocent decision, and a few pictures that tell the wrong story. Because the truth is, I didn't lose my wife that night because of what I did. I lost her because of what she thought I did. And that's a storm you can't outrun. After that night, the atmosphere at home was like ice. No matter what I said, she wouldn't believe me. "I only went to the party with your mother," I told her. "With my mother, only?" she repeated, her voice trembling, somewhere between disbelief and anger. Who takes someone's mother to a party like that? With music, drinks, dancing? What were you thinking? And that's when it hit me. The problem wasn't really about the party. It wasn't about the night, or the music, or the laughter. It was about appearance. It was about how things looked. Because people don't always believe the truth, they believe what they see. I hadn't done anything wrong. I didn't flirt. I didn't hide anything. I was simply being polite, trying not to show up to a crowded party alone. But the story that others told, the story in those photos, was stronger than my explanation. The gossip spread like wildfire. People from the party started talking. "They looked so good together," someone said. Another person joked online. "I thought that was his new girlfriend, not his wife's mother." And just like that, a single photo turned into a scandal overnight. My mother-in-law was embarrassed. She called my wife, her voice shaking with guilt, trying to explain. "Sweetheart, it was just a misunderstanding," she said. But my wife's pride had already been wounded. To her, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was humiliation. Days passed in silence. Breakfast became wordless. Dinner felt like sitting in two separate worlds at the same table. Every time I tried to speak, she shut me down. "Enough," she'd say coldly. "Don't explain anymore. It's over." I would lie awake at night, replaying every second of that evening in my head, wondering how something so innocent could twist into something so damaging. I thought about deleting every trace of that night, about pretending it never happened, but the internet doesn't forget. Neither do people. Then, one evening, she walked into the room holding her phone. She didn't say anything at first. She looked at the picture again, the one that had caused all the chaos. Me laughing, her mother smiling beside me, lights in the background. Then she looked at me. Maybe, she said softly, maybe I overreacted. And in that moment, the tightness in my chest, the weight I had been carrying for days, finally started to fade. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall between us. That night, as we sat together in silence, I realized something I'd never forget. Sometimes it's not the truth that destroys a relationship, it's the image of the truth. And sometimes, one small step you take on an ordinary night, one photo, one innocent gesture, can echo through your entire marriage like thunder. Because love isn't only built on what you do. It's also built on what people believe you've done. Days had passed, and the silence in the house had slowly turned into something heavier, tension. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was there, lingering in every room, hanging in the air between us like invisible smoke. My wife had stopped speaking to me. No good mornings, no, how was your day? No small talk over dinner. Just quiet. But even in that silence, everything I did was for her, hoping, somehow, to show that I still cared. I woke up early every morning, made breakfast without saying a word, left for work without sending a message, and came home quietly in the evening, careful not to disturb her. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked distant. But I could tell from her eyes, from the way she sat lost in thought at night, that she was still turning that night over and over in her mind. Then one evening, while the television flickered softly in the background, she sat next to me on the couch. It was the first time in days that she'd chosen to sit close. Weeks later, one quiet morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my mother-in-law was standing there. She looked nervous, holding a plastic bag full of pastries, her eyes carrying a guilty sort of smile. "Did you two make up?" she asked softly. I nodded. "We're talking again," I said. "Not fully, but it's getting better." She stepped inside and sat down at the kitchen table, setting the pastries between us. For a moment, she looked at her hands, then said, "You know, my son, I've been thinking about that night too. I wish I hadn't gone. She misunderstood your kindness, but it wasn't your fault. It was mine. I agreed to go with you. I should have known how it might look." Her voice broke a little as she spoke, and I realized that she, too, had carried her share of guilt all this time. That morning, the three of us, me, my wife, and her mother, sat together for the first time since everything happened. We didn't talk much about the past, but somehow, sharing that silence felt like healing. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in a quiet kitchen, with warm pastries, soft smiles, and the realization that everyone, no matter how good their intentions, can make mistakes that ripple through the hearts of the people they love most. In that moment, my chest tightened. "No, Mom," I said softly. "You're not to blame. You didn't do anything wrong. I only invited you out of kindness." But sometimes, even good intentions, when mixed with bad timing, can turn into trouble. We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Then my wife walked out of the kitchen. She froze for a moment when she saw her mother sitting there, but she didn't say anything. My mother-in-law turned to her gently and said, "My girl, when I raised you, I always told you this. Judge people by their intentions. This man's heart is pure. There's no sin here. But your anger, that's what's hurting you. Let it go." My wife's eyes filled with tears. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's just that when I saw that photo, I don't know, something inside me broke." I stood up and walked toward her. "The only moment I held her hand," I said softly, "was when I missed you. And even then, you were the only one on my mind." There was silence, and then a breath. Suddenly, we all started laughing. It was strange, almost absurd. The thing that had kept us apart for weeks was nothing more than a small misunderstanding, something that had gotten lost between truth and perception. That day, we all sat down at the table together. Mom warmed the pastries, my wife made coffee, and I tried to make light of everything, cracking small jokes to ease the mood. And as we ate, the bitterness inside us slowly turned into peace. From that day on, life began to return to normal. Laughter echoed in the house again. Those cold, silent breakfasts were replaced with jokes and smiles. And yet, Between us, one little inside joke remained, the mother-in-law syndrome, grinning face with sweat. One evening, while we were watching TV together, my wife turned to me with a playful grin. "So," she said, "if you ever want to go to another party, whose arm will you take this time?" I smiled. "Yours, of course." She burst out laughing. "Are you sure? Mom's still hurt. Maybe this time the three of us should go together." The three of us. For a second, I pictured it, and then we both started laughing again. In that moment, I realized something. That whole incident hadn't torn us apart. It had actually brought us closer. Because behind every argument, there's always a little bit of love and a little bit of fear of losing it. A week later, our friends threw another party. This time, I went with my wife. We both burst into laughter. That night, we danced, laughed, and even took a picture together. But this time, we wrote a note beneath the photo. "Misunderstandings fade, but true love remains. Red heart." And from that day on, every time we argued, we'd bring out that picture. "Don't forget," I'd say, "you were still in my heart that night." Months passed. That infamous party incident became nothing more than a family joke. At every gathering, my mother-in-law would always bring it up. "My son-in-law, the one who caused chaos with me on his arm," she'd say, laughing out loud. My wife would roll her eyes and reply, "Mom, you're still talking about that," before bursting into giggles. One evening, we were sitting on the balcony. The sun was setting, tea in our hands, silence hung comfortably between us. Then my wife turned to me and said, "You know, I was so angry that day. But looking back now, I'm glad it happened." I was surprised. "What do you mean?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Because after that day, I got to know you all over again. I used to think you were just calm and strong," she said. "But that day I realized, you're someone who acts with his heart." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Her words sank deep into me, because that's all I ever wanted in the middle of all that chaos, for my heart to be understood. I took her hand and said, "Maybe that's why we're still here. Because even when our hearts were misunderstood, we never let go of each other." Just then, the doorbell rang. Guess who it was? Of course, my mother-in-law. She walked in laughing, holding her phone up. "Look what I found," she said. "That famous party photo." We all burst into laughter. "This photo isn't cursed anymore," I said. "It's part of our family legend." That evening, the three of us sat together and talked about everything. The past, the mistakes, the funny moments. We laughed, we opened up, we shared what we had once hidden. And in the middle of it all, she got excited right away. "This time, I promise I won't ruin the plan," she said, laughing. We organized everything together, secretly, carefully, and with that same familiar joy that had once brought chaos into our lives. While my wife was out, we decorated the house. Colorful balloons, twinkling lights, a soft melody playing in the background. We placed the cake on the table, lit the candles one by one, and dimmed the lights. For a moment, I just stood there, looking around, realizing how far we had all come, from confusion and misunderstandings to laughter and love. When the doorbell finally rang, everyone took their places, trying not to giggle. The door opened, and as soon as my wife stepped inside, the room erupted. "Party popper surprise." She froze, her eyes wide, then burst out laughing. For a few seconds, she just stood there, taking it all in, the decorations, the music, the people she loved most. But soon enough, her gaze landed on her mother. "Mom," she said, smiling knowingly, "this has your fingerprints all over it, doesn't it?" Her mother grinned and replied instantly, "This time, I didn't hang on your husband's arm. I just got caught up in his plan." The whole room roared with laughter. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that what used to be an awkward memory had turned into a bond that held us all together. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was a story, one we had lived, survived, and now loved to laugh about. As the night went on, candles melted away, the music softened, and one by one, our friends began to leave. The laughter faded into a comfortable silence. My wife took the last bite of cake and turned toward me, her eyes glimmering in the soft light. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "if you hadn't taken my mom's arm that night at the party, maybe we wouldn't have become this strong." I chuckled. "So you're saying I still deserve a thank you for that night?" She smirked. "A thank you? Please." That night took at least 5 years off my life from stress. We both laughed, long and loud. The kind of laughter that only people who've truly been through something together can share. That laughter carried through the years. Time passed, as it always does. Our lives changed in ways we never expected. The house that was once filled with quiet evenings and late-night talks now echoed with tiny footsteps and bright laughter. A little girl with her mother's eyes and my stubborn smile ran through the rooms, leaving trails of toys and joy behind her. Every now and then, my wife and I would look at each other, smiling silently, knowing exactly what the other was thinking. We had come a long way from that confusing night, through misunderstandings, lessons, forgiveness, and growth. But no matter how much time passed, one thing never changed: our story. A story that began with a mistake, grew through laughter, and became the heart of our little family. Because sometimes, love isn't about perfection. It's about the beautiful chaos that brings you closer, again and again. One evening, we were all sitting together as a family. The living room was filled with that familiar warmth, the smell of tea, the quiet hum of the evening, and the sound of our daughter's laughter as she flipped through an old photo album. Suddenly, she stopped on a page and squinted curiously. "Daddy," she said, pointing at one of the pictures, "who's this?" Her tiny finger landed right on my mother-in-law's face, that famous photo that I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, her? That's the woman who once got your daddy into a lot of trouble." My wife immediately cut in, grinning. "In other words, your grandma." The three of us burst into laughter. Our daughter looked utterly confused, her brows furrowed as she tried to understand why we were laughing so hard. "But why did Grandma make you sad, Daddy?" she asked innocently. My wife smiled gently and stroked her hair. "She didn't make anyone sad, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups just misunderstand each other." I leaned forward, trying to explain it in a way she'd understand. "You see, honey," I said softly, "sometimes people see things the wrong way. But if your heart is in the right place, everything eventually works out. Because what truly matters isn't what you do, but why you do it." She tilted her head, thinking hard about it, then asked, "So, did you and Grandma make up afterward?" My wife looked at me. I looked back at her. We both smiled. "Of course we did," I said, "because we could never stay upset with each other for long." For a moment, silence filled the room. Not the awkward kind, but the peaceful kind that settles in when everyone's heart is full. As I watched my daughter slip back into her thoughts, I realized something beautiful. That old story, the one that had once nearly broken us, had now become a lesson, a gift for her. Time had healed everything, quietly, gently, but it had also taught us one unforgettable truth. Speech balloon true love can't be destroyed by a misunderstanding. Later that night, after we tucked our daughter into bed, my wife came up beside me on the balcony. The moonlight spilled softly over her face as she whispered, "You know, I'm glad you took my mom's arm that night." I smiled, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "I know," I said quietly, "because that night made us who we are today." She rested her head on my shoulder, and we just stood there for a while. Two souls who had weathered storms and found peace in the calm after. As I looked out over the city, I thought about how strange life can be. Sometimes, everything begins with a misunderstanding. But if your heart stays true, life has a way of writing a better story than you could ever plan. All those moments, the mistakes, the laughter, the tears, they stop being scars and turn into memories that make you smile years later. Time went by faster than we ever imagined. Our little girl grew up, too quickly, it seemed. Now she was in university, carving out her own path in the world, full of dreams and determination. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at that same photo again, a small smile on her lips. As for us, we were still here, in the same house, under the same balcony, but with a peace that only comes from years of loving, learning, and forgiving. The world outside kept changing, but inside, we had found something timeless. A quiet kind of happiness, built on understanding and love that had been tested, shaken, and ultimately strengthened. And every once in a while, when the evening breeze carried the faint sound of laughter from the street below, I'd close my eyes and remember that night. The laughter, the confusion, the warmth, and think to myself, some stories don't need to be perfect. They just need to be real. Because the truest love stories are written not in flawless moments, but in the way two hearts find their way back to each other. Again and again, through every misunderstanding, every season, And every year that passes, point one evening, many years later, that famous photo found its way back into our lives again. Our daughter was packing her things before moving to her new apartment. She had decided it was finally time to go through the old boxes stored in the attic. Those boxes filled with fragments of our past, birthday cards, souvenirs, and countless photographs from another time. Suddenly, we heard her shout from the next room, "Mom, Dad, you have to see this." We looked at each other, smiling, already guessing what it might be. And sure enough, she came running in, laughing, holding that photo, the one from the party. There we were, me and my wife's mother, standing side by side, caught mid-laughter under the lights of that unforgettable night. The edges of the photo had turned yellow with time, the colors faded slightly, but somehow, it still carried the same warmth, the same story. Our daughter couldn't stop giggling. "So, Dad," she said between laughs, "you really took Grandma to a party on your arm?" My wife jumped in before I could answer, shaking her head with a teasing grin. "Oh yes, and then he spent weeks writing me poems just to make up for it." I laughed, pretending to look offended. What could I do? Your mom was too proud to forgive me easily. But honestly, I said softly, if that night hadn't happened, maybe we wouldn't have ended up as close as we are today. Our daughter smiled, her eyes glowing with affection. She gently wiped the dust from the photo and placed it into a small frame. "I think this is the funniest and most romantic story in this whole house," she said. "When I grow up, I'm definitely going to tell this to my kids." My wife chuckled and looked at me. "So, our grandchildren are going to hear all about your party scandal, huh?" I winked playfully. "Let them hear it. What matters isn't what we did, it's how we loved." That evening, after she went to bed, my wife and I found ourselves back on the balcony, our favorite place, where so many memories had been shared. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft golds and pinks. I reached out and held her hand. "Do you remember that night?" I asked quietly. She smiled, her eyes distant with nostalgia. "How could I forget? It was chaotic, embarrassing, but I'm glad it happened. That night tested our hearts, and we passed." We sat in silence for a while. The only sound was the soft whisper of the wind and the rustle of the trees below. Years had come and gone. People had changed, faces had aged, but somehow, we were still the same. Two hearts that had once stumbled, but never stopped beating together. That old photo, once a symbol of misunderstanding, had turned into something completely different. It wasn't a reminder of a mistake anymore. It was proof of everything we'd built afterward. Proof that love, when it's real, survives the awkward moments, the laughter, the hurt, and the passing of time. Sometimes, I think life is funny that way. It takes one small misunderstanding to create a story that lasts a lifetime. A moment that feels like chaos can one day become your family's favorite legend. The story that defines who you are and what you've learned. As the last bit of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, I glanced at my wife and whispered, "You know, that night wasn't a disaster after all." She turned to me, smiling. "No," she said softly. "It was the beginning of everything good." And as the stars began to appear, I realized she was right. That night, that photo, that laughter, it wasn't just a memory. It was our miracle. A single moment that began with confusion, but ended up becoming the foundation of a lifetime of love, forgiveness, and understanding. Because in the end, the best stories aren't the perfect ones. They're the ones that survive time, laughter, and love, and still make your heart feel full, even decades later. And that's how one small misunderstanding turned into a lifetime story. A moment that could have broken us ended up becoming the reason we grew stronger. Sometimes, life doesn't need to be perfect to be beautiful. It just needs two people who choose to stay. Even when things get confusing, even when words are misunderstood, even when pride gets in the way. Because love isn't proven by the easy days. It's proven by the nights you choose to forgive, by the mornings you decide to start again, and by the memories that still make you smile years later. That old photo, once just a frozen image of chaos, became a reminder of everything that truly matters. Understanding, patience, and the quiet promise of never giving up on each other. So if you've ever found yourself in the middle of a misunderstanding, if your heart has been misread or your intentions twisted, remember this story, because sometimes the moments that hurt us the most become the ones that teach us what love really means. Love isn't always about saying the right thing. It's about staying, listening, and believing that what you built together is worth more than any mistake. And years later, when time has softened the edges of every memory, you'll look back and realize none of it was random. Every laughter, every tear, every misunderstanding was leading you here, to the kind of love that survives everything. Speech balloon, because real love doesn't fear misunderstandings, it grows through them. Thank you for watching. And remember, every love story has its own imperfect miracle. See you in the next one.